Hey, how do you create an automated flow in Klaviyo? Well, in this excerpt of the webinar, we will find out. All right, but let's get into the meat of what I'm sure everyone joined us to learn about, which is automated flows. And in my personal opinion, I believe that flows really are the foundation of email marketing. It's the key to consistent engagement. And if done well, you should really strive for a 50-50 split between your flows and your campaigns that you're sending on a regular basis. So that'll be one thing to kind of keep an eye on as you get started with using flows or as you move further in your journey. If you have a really high order rate on your campaigns, like maybe 70% of your orders come from campaigns, well, maybe that highlights that there's opportunity to increase your flow performance to kind of make up some of that room. And then on the flip side, if 70% of your orders are coming from flows, well, maybe that highlights the fact that you have an opportunity to send even more campaigns to try to even that out. That way you're not as dependent on one feature or another. But with that, what are some of the must-have flows that everyone should have accounted for? If you had a chance to review our last webinar, we touched on these briefly, but what I'll do now is kind of go into a little bit more detail on some of the must-have flows that should be set up for every account. So the first one is the welcome series, and I'm sure we're all familiar with that one. That's really the highest performing flow that you could possibly have is the welcome series. That's where you get to greet new subscribers, you introduce your brand, and that's really when someone signs up for your newsletter or they sign up for your content for the first time, you know that they have an interest in what it is that you're providing. And so being able to communicate with them right from the start is going to be a very, very powerful tool for you. And then as they start interacting with your site, there are abandonment flows that everyone should have set up, including browse abandonment, which means someone's looked at your site, but they didn't really add anything to the cart or start the checkout process. And then you could take it a step further and have cart abandonment, which means that someone did put something in the cart, but they didn't complete the purchase. So in that case, you would really want to engage with them with an automated abandoned cart flow. Then the moment that we've all been waiting for is whenever they make the purchase. That is probably the second highest opportunity to engage with your customers because they just purchased from you. That means their buying intent is high at that moment. And a lot of us would have the tendency to think that they just purchased, so that maybe they don't want to purchase again, but that's actually the opposite. They just purchased, they're excited about their purchase. This is actually a great opportunity to boost your brand or continue to educate your customers or even try to cross-sell them on other opportunities because you know that they're already primed to make a purchase. And so using this is a really great way to tap into that intent. But as it happens with everyone, customers make a purchase, then they don't purchase for a while. Making sure that you have a win-back flow in place will really help you to re-engage customers that haven't made a purchase in a while. And then there's just some additional flows that I think are really best practice. If you have access to any special data like a birthday flows perform really well because people feel special, they feel heard, they feel taken care of by the brand that they support. So definitely highly recommend using a birthday flow. As well as on the flip side is, you have some customers that purchase and then never come back. You have some customers that are truly your VIPs. These are the ones that are loyal to you. They're spending more than the average customer. And so whenever you identify your customers that fall into this VIP category, you should have a flow set up that really makes them feel special and takes that connection to the next level. So perhaps you can offer them some exclusive offers or early access to your next product or just something to make them feel special. And what that will do is encourage your most valuable customers to become even more valuable and increase their lifetime value even more. And then if you're in the consumable space, if you have something that expires or people need to repurchase, having a replenishment reminder in place is very important. And then we're crossing the line into advanced, but we'll talk about this a little bit more, is just how do you continue to increase your customer loyalty throughout their journey? One of the ways that you can do that is by setting up an order milestone flow. So at different milestones within their journey, maybe it's on the first order, the fifth order, and the 10th order, you can send them a special message or maybe a special reward. We'll take a look at what one of the clients we've worked with, we'll take a look at how they do that, and they send free products whenever their customers reach certain milestones. But this can be really effective to increase engagement. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pause here. We just looked at a lot of must-have flows, and luckily Klaviyo makes it really easy to get started and have a solid foundation set up pretty quickly. So we're going to take a minute to look around in Klaviyo, set up a couple of these must-have flows, and then from there we'll kind of move on to some of the more advanced use cases that we have. Before we do that though, one thing I forgot to mention, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to use that Q&A feature in the chat. We have a couple of moderators here that are monitoring those, and I'll make sure to pause and address any questions that anyone has along the way. All right. So we now switched over to Klaviyo, and we're in a demo account because I really kind of wanted to start fresh and kind of give you an idea is if you haven't really gotten started with setting up your flows. I wanted to look at, like I mentioned, some of the pre-built templates that Klaviyo already provides. There's a lot of them that are available for some of those must-have flows that I just mentioned. So let's pop this open and take a look. So in Klaviyo, under flows is where you're going to find the setup for flows, obviously. One of the things I like to do is go to view all ideas, and this is going to pull up, like I mentioned, it's going to pull up these pre-built templates for a lot of these common scenarios. So I would probably recommend starting with the essentials. Like we just mentioned, there's a browse abandonment, a welcome series, a post-purchase follow-up, as well as, the customer win back. And then once you have the essentials set up, then you can start to expand and look at other types of goals that you may have and how can these flows help you to achieve those goals. But let's start with the basics, because I think what happens sometimes is we can feel overwhelmed by all of the options available to us within Klaviyo. It's one of the reasons that we exist as a company is to help support and clear those obstacles for our clients. So one of the things I really recommend is just take it one step at a time. Sure, you need to have your full strategy and plan built out, but in order to make it just a little bit easier to make some momentum, I would say let's just start one thing at a time, and let's start that with the welcome series, which is really the most important and should be set up for every single business, no question. So we'll go ahead and start there with the welcome series. All right, so whenever you go to set this up for the first time, it's going to give you a short description. You can rename it, and then you can also choose which trigger this should use. So like I mentioned earlier, the trigger is really what's going to start this flow off in the first place. For a welcome series, typically that's whenever they join your email list. In this case, it's named newsletter. So whenever someone subscribes to the newsletter, that will trigger this flow for the welcome series. So I'm going to go ahead and click create flow. Great. You can see that we already have a foundational flow here. The trigger is when someone is added to a newsletter, it will then split. And if they've placed an order at least once over all time, they'll get a thank you. But if they've never made a purchase in this flow, it's a great opportunity to incentivize them and maybe offer them a discount. So if they have not placed an order, you can offer them a discount. And then both of those kind of come back and they wait 3 days and they send a final email to all of your, to everyone that signs up, encouraging them to follow your social media. So I think it's a really great starting point. I think I would certainly recommend adding on to it. I typically recommend maybe 3 to 5 emails in a welcome series, but I've seen some welcome series go to 30 emails. If you feel like you have something really, strong to, if you feel like you have something strong to communicate, you could really build on this and make it pretty robust. But I would say 3 to 5 is a really strong starting point. And now, before we take a look at some of these specific things, I just wanted to highlight a couple of features here and what you could do. So I mentioned there's a trigger. That's what starts the flow. And then from there, typically what you're working with are actions. So across the left here, you can see the different actions. We can send an email. We can send a text message. We can update a property on their profile. We can do an internal alert to a team. And when we talk about the advanced flows in a second, I'll talk about a couple of these other options. But one really powerful feature is webhooks. And it may be a little bit too technical for the scope of this webinar, but I'm going to touch on it briefly because there's some really cool cross-channel integrations that you can utilize by using webhooks. And what's also cool is that if you've integrated with any other app, there oftentimes are additional actions that will show up here based on the integrations that you have set up within your account. So those are actions. you could set a time delay, and then there's logic. So these were the key terms that I mentioned earlier. Hopefully those make sense. If you have any specific questions of those, put those in the Q&A. But let's just build on this just a little bit. So triggered whenever they sign up for our newsletter. If they have become a customer, or if they're already a customer, they would go down this branch for yes. And if you click on this action, it's going to give you some additional options here that you can do. So you can rename it, but really what's most important here is making sure that your subject line, your preview text, and your sender information is updated and accurate. And then you could work on updating your template for this email to make it look really professional and engaging. For this webinar, we're not going to talk about template design really at all. There are plenty of other webinars, especially from Klaviyo, on how to do template design. But one thing I kind of want to mention is I noticed that this is an area that oftentimes stops people from setting up flows. They go in to set up their flow, they get to the first action, which is an email, and then they get overwhelmed with having to create an email template. I would recommend not worrying about your email templates just yet, but get the framework of your flow set up fully based on how you think it would work best. What are the actions and the conditions that need to be accounted for? Get all of that set up as much as possible first. And then what that'll allow you to do is then take it one at a time. And so it's not as overwhelming. I could go in here and I could update. It's going to focus on this first email. Let me update the template. And there's a lot of templates that Klaviyo provides. So, it doesn't have to be overwhelming, but just wanted to kind of relate that's definitely something I've seen and witnessed. And so breaking it into smaller actions that you can take and then taking them one at a time will really help you make progress and momentum as you get everything set up. All right, so we could customize these. We wait 3 days, send the second email. But like I said, I want to extend this a little bit. So we're just going to do a couple of things. We are going to add a time delay after this second email, and we're going to wait 5 days. Save that. And then we're going to send one last email. So all we have to do is drag email over here, and then we're free to update the information as we see fit. So all right. Once again, kind of ignoring template. Templates are very important. It's something that you're going to want to A/B test. And so I'll just point out the template library here real quickly. If you haven't seen that, there's a lot of templates that allow you to get started pretty quickly. But let me just bounce back over to our flow, finish this up, and then we'll move along. Yep. So we had to wait 5 days. We'll set up the welcome email 3. And then if there was anything else that we wanted to add here, just additional emails, maybe we want to send a text message, it's really as simple as just dragging this action over, making sure it's in the right spot, and then updating the action with any specific information that you may need. So for an SMS, for example, they would want, what is that text message? You would just update that here. Save it. Now you would have an SMS action. I'll check in on the questions here in just a second, but let's look at a few other template ideas. So you saw how simple that was to really set it up, customize it. The last step would be to make it live and make it actually be available for when your customers sign up. I would probably recommend doing some testing before you did that, but let's just take a look at a couple of other examples here. So if I go to view all flows, you're going to notice there's different versions for different things. So we talked about cart abandonment. Here's one already for happy birthday. First purchase anniversary is a really good one to use. Maybe if you've had something that's out of stock and you want to communicate that, hey, it's back in stock, there's a couple of templates here. One is VIP versus non-VIP. Again, maybe let's just take a look at this one as an example. But just spend some time, just review these. Maybe make a list. What are 5 flows that I want to set up this week? Let me just start there. Choose 5 that really you think are going to have the highest chance of success. Set those up because you will already be so much further along than a lot of companies that aren't using flows and automations. So really don't get overwhelmed, even though there is a lot of options. Start small, maybe choose 5, get those set up, and then you can move on to adding more, because really all of this is an ongoing process anyways.